Blog viewers. We're going to continue, actually we're going to start our summer, as it is well into summer now. We're going to do our summer video posts as we did last year, and glad everyone is still here. Blog is some 300, lost track, 350 some posts in, close to halfway through, and appreciate everyone's readership, although at this point there's not many readers left. However, we continue on. Today we're going to talk about humor and the importance of humor. Very important human good that we only just started discussing this year. Probably should have been focused on earlier, but humor is vitally important, and I'll discuss why, how important it is in terms of people being able to connect on some sort of shared contact point nowadays. And humor, I think, represents that in a way that very few things still do. So let's start out observing some things. Today, human persons have both increasingly specialized jobs and also increasingly specialized hobbies and outside interests. This specialization has probably been increasing for some time, but it's really getting going now, and it's probably increasing even now almost exponentially. Specialization in jobs is evident almost everywhere you look, any city, any state, any country almost. We don't have doctors, lawyers, professors, or businessmen anymore in most places, but rather we have cardiologists, bankruptcy lawyers, professors specializing in the physics of black holes, and businessmen that sell chemicals used in Clorox, and maybe one of the chemicals, 1 out of 1,000. This specialization, driven by sort of economic necessity, I would say begins in one's 20s, even in college, and shortly thereafter, and is almost totally cemented by early 30s. After that, it becomes almost totally solidified from the operation of habit and routine, both, again, in jobs and outside interests. Now, to persons not in these jobs, almost everything that happens within them seems sort of foreign and distant and alien, almost pointless. Conversely, to persons that are in these jobs, almost all of life consists of what the person is doing in that job. And so if you were to overhear a friend discuss a friend's conference call for work, and you weren't in that line of work, it would sound like almost total gibberish to you. And why would it sound like gibberish? Because it's become so specialized. The topics, the subjects, the jargon, the symbolism used, the ways of communicating, it's all specialized. It's all only really known by people that have been doing that kind of thing for years and years, and it makes zero sense to anyone else. Now, if you're presented with someone if you're talking to someone about their work and you're not in that specialized work, I would argue you can only really feign interest in what they're doing, because fundamentally you can't understand or relate to what they're doing. You don't even understand it, and if you can't understand it, you obviously can't relate to it. And you also can't understand why they find that line of work very meaningful, why they're so excited by it, or why they do it for so many years, why they've been doing it. You don't quite understand that, so it's hard to have that genuine interest and genuine desire to relate on that level. Situation here, that was with work, but I think the situation is increasingly identical with hobbies or outside interests people have. For example, I would argue a golfer and a triathlete don't really speak the same language, nor understand what the other person enjoys in their particular activity. The golfer sees triathlon, I would assume, as painful, too demanding, brutally isolating, and what's the point of doing all these miles by yourself, on and on and on. It seems sort of pointless. The triathlete sees the golfer similarly as doing something that's probably too slow pace, too limited, not really doing much for the body, and all those other things. Another example, two friends can have entirely two different TV shows they like. One loves a horror series show, and another likes a documentary focusing on the life of insects. Now, again, how could these people with these totally different outside interests really relate to these shows that they're watching? One is a horror story, the other is a documentary on the life of insects. The interests are just too separated to really discuss meaningfully, for each person to have a meaningful interest in what the other is watching. So I would argue this is between any two persons. There's usually, today, no bridge really connecting their shared work or shared favored outside interest, such that there would be really shared discussion points. So what can we do about that? This leaves sort of precious few shared points of contacts for people to discuss when you meet someone that's not in your specialized career or specialized outside interests. You can always small talk about the weather, sports, the stock market, what it's doing, good deals in the town for restaurants or bars or whatever, some Target's running a sale, whatever, one's recent debauchery somewhere. You can talk about that kind of stuff. You can always fill up time with that, but to what good and with what value? I would argue not much. And so what else can you talk about? Obviously, you could discuss wisdom. You could discuss truths that you've learned in your life or try to explore truths with another person. But as we know, in today's society, that's not that would probably be viewed as out of place most of the time. Most people wouldn't be too receptive to your discussing some point about materialism and consumer society all out of a sudden. That I don't think that would be received too well most of the time. So what can you talk about? Well, what's the point of contact? And again, in this post on humor, I would argue that humor is superior to certainly the small talk that we talked about and all those other sort of minutiae that people tend to talk about. But humor is really it's almost like a universal language that people can always tap into, and it's a good point of contact. It usually doesn't require detailed. It may have to make a joke, for example, about your job or your outside interest. It may require a little bit of detailed description of what you're doing, or sort of detailed inside knowledge of what you're doing, but not much. Most of the humor can sort of be transmitted without much understanding of the minutiae of what you do. And again, this universal language theme is important with humor. If you were sent to Japan, for example, and you didn't know, you barely knew Japanese, I think again the first point of contact with most people could be humor. They might find funny various things you do. You might find funny things they do, and you could laugh about it. Again, that would be the shared point of contact. Now, with humor, one of the tricks is obviously. One of the problems is that I think many people think they are very, very funny, and but they're just not. And that's one of the things that is an issue. It's sort of like it's the thing about most people thinking they're various levels of superior looks or intelligence or athletic abilities. You see these surveys about. People thinking they're above average, 90 to 95% thinking they are, but in fact that obviously cannot be the case for that to be true. So I think the same thing happens with humor too, and I think that so I think everyone needs to sort of really assess how funny they really are, and make an honest evaluation there, and rather than just assuming that they're very, very funny when in fact they may not be very funny at all. And so I think that's kind of one focus you could look at and see, look, am I really being funny? Are people really laughing at what I'm saying? Are they just doing that because they're being nice or whatever? And what was so funny about what I just said? Why would I expect people to laugh at that? Those sorts of questions. Putting that aside, once you sort of get some reality check on that issue, I think, again, that the effort to cultivate humor and comic sensibility in your life is increasingly important in a specialized world where people really have very little shared points of contact because they're so specialized in so much of what they do, both careers and outside interests. So I think the failure to develop humor and relate to people on the level of humor is going to leave you sort of in a tough place where you're not really able to connect to people that are outside of your small circle of friends and co-workers and all the rest. So that's it. First summer video post. Obviously, I haven't done this in a while, so I hope as the summer goes on, I'll shake off some of the rust and continue with this. So we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.